Michael, I have been shocked by the vigor of the argument from the moral law as an inference to the existence of God by a wide variety of people, from scientists to philosophers to theologians, making this argument one of the most powerful. It was not one that I thought had a lot of weight, but I really respect some of the people who are trying to convince me. Help me to go one way or the other here.
Well, I mean, it is surprising how much weight is being put upon the argument today. The reason it's surprising is that something very close to refutation was put forward a long time ago by Plato. In his dialogue, the Euthyphro, Socrates is concerned with the nature of holiness or piety, right? And at some point he asks a question to the effect, are holy things holy because they are loved by the gods? Or on the contrary, are they loved by the gods because they are holy, right? And so the question is whether, so to speak, the gods loving something can make it holy, or whether it's holy independently of
some objective reality to
That's
it.
right. And you can ask the same question vis-a-vis the God of monotheism and regard to goodness, badness, rightness, and wrongness, right? And you can ask, is an action wrong, for example, because God forbids it or prohibits it, right? Or on the contrary, does God forbid it or prohibit it because it's wrong, right? Now, if you consider those two answers, right, if you adopt the second answer, that is that God forbids something because it's wrong, then there must be, so to speak, objective moral standards.
Independent of God, or
That's
independent standard in the world of a morality.
That's right. Yeah. And so the other option is that it's God's forbidding something that makes an action wrong, right? That means that God could forbid or could command very different things, right? He could command people to, inflict pain upon innocent individuals and so on. He could command people to kill, etc., individuals, right? And on this theory, sometimes referred to as divine command theory of morality, right? If God commanded those things, then those things would be morally obligatory. We ought to torture people. We ought to kill people, right? Most philosophers, including religious philosophers, think that that's an incredible sort of conclusion. And so the divine command theory is widely rejected, right? And so that's one powerful argument based upon Plato's Euthyphro for the conclusion that there need to be objective moral standards independent of the existence of God. And God, if he is good, will then, so to speak, issue commands, and so to speak, in accordance with those standards.
Doesn't that make your God, the God that you're talking about now, subservient to some higher moral standard?
Well, the alternative is that what the right moral standards are is, in a sense, arbitrary and is dependent simply upon the whim of a creator deity, right? And I think that alternative is very implausible. And I don't think one should think in terms of subservience. I think one should think that for God to be good is for God to, so to speak, shape his behavior in accordance with what is objectively right and objectively wrong.
But how is that objective standard being set if it's not for this supernatural God? Is it up to human beings to set that standard? Because we know from, different cultures and anthropology and sociology that different societies have different views of what's right and wrong.
Well, here's a comparison. God has to obey the laws of logic, okay, right? That's a strong must, okay? And similarly, the laws of mathematics. God can't make it the case that, to use a Russell example, that 1 + 1 + 1 equals 1, okay? Cannot make 3 equal to 1, right? And so the idea is that the thing is, logical truths and mathematical truths are necessary truths, right? I think it's very reasonable to think that moral truths are also necessary truths, right? The idea is that if something is a moral truth, it's not just a moral truth in this world, but in all possible worlds, right?
I agree with your first one. The second, to me, doesn't logically follow of necessity. I seem to want to agree with it, but definitely not out of necessity.
Well, the question is, you have to distinguish between, some moral truths depend upon the way the world is, okay, right? And so, here's a silly moral truth, right? It's wrong to yank a cat's tail, right? Okay? Now, that's a moral truth in this world, but there are other worlds where yanking a cat's tail rather than causing it pain would give it a jolt of pleasure, right? And it would be morally okay to do so. So there are moral truths that depend upon the world, but there are others, the fact that pleasure is intrinsically good, pain is intrinsically bad, right? Inflicting suffering upon innocent individuals is morally wrong, right? Those seem to me to be truths that, if they hold in this world, hold in all other worlds as well.
And therefore, morality in that sense has an independent existence, not dependent upon some supernatural power imposing it. And therefore, is your argument, the moral law then is devoid of any power to imply the existence of God?
Yes, I mean, the way of putting it, this is really there are these two arguments. There's the Youthifer argument, and then there's the second argument, which we've gotten into, and that maintains that basic moral truths are necessary, right, and hold in all possible worlds. But on the other hand, the claim is that the existence of an omnipotent, omniscient, and morally perfect being is not something that obtains in all possible worlds. Right. I mean, that is that atheism could be true, is the weak claim here, right? But if that's right, if there is a possible world where atheism is true, and yet if moral truths hold in all possible worlds, then it follows logically that moral truths cannot be logically dependent upon the existence of God.
Yeah, I would think the logical hole in that argument is the claim that there are moral laws that must hold in all possible worlds, whereas a God does not. In other words, so I think by predisposition, you're putting a moral law, however narrowly you define it, on the highest possible plane, at the level of 1 + 1 + 1 = 3.
Okay. Well, logical whole is a slightly stronger expression than I would use. But I would agree with this, that that's the part of the argument that's most open to question, okay, right? And there are a number of philosophers whose views I respect who think that there are no objective moral truths, right? But the claim I want to make essentially is, if there are objective moral truths, then the basic ones are logically necessary and hold in all possible worlds, right? And then, of course, it's further question whether there are objective moral truths. And that's a difficult question in ethics.
Let me say it this way. I would think that if you can demonstrate that there are moral truths that are objective, that would necessarily exist in all possible worlds, then you cannot use the moral law to demonstrate an existence of God.
Yes, I think that's right. I think that's the appropriate conclusion.